Hello, everybody. Welcome to the BitGo and Figment webinar on solving the blockchain trilemma with Avalanche. My name is Chris. I'll be your moderator today. I work with Figment and more on the marketing team with focus on education and production with 7 years in crypto experience. It feels like 14 years, but that's neither here nor there. While you guys pile on in the room, we'll just give a quick breakdown. We have a poll down at the bottom. If you click the little plus button next to the chat, you can see the poll and fill that out. Simple question: are you currently staking AVAX? And then at any point during the webinar, if you would like to ask a question, feel free to just go ahead and throw them in the chat and we'll get to them as we see them. Or at the end, we'll open it up to Q&As as well. Joining us today on this webinar, we have Nathan joining from Figment. Nathan, would you like to introduce yourself and we can just pass it around from there?
Sure. We got it.
Maybe try it again.
Get back to.
Uh-oh.
I can go too if you want.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Thank you.
While Nathan figures out his mic, on my end, I'm Jay, VP of Marketing at Ava Labs, focus on day-to-day marketing operations as well as leading efforts within product, events, and community, but generally just have been in the space for a while, so tend to kind of lend my brain at times when it comes to some of the more historical learnings, if you will. One thing I always summarize is it's not necessarily that I know exactly what direction to go in, but I know all of the different mistakes that teams such as ourselves should avoid. So happy to be here.
And Daniel, you want to go ahead and intro while we see if Nathan can fix his technical difficulties?
Yeah, awesome. Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel. I'm a product manager at BitGo. I oversee all of our staking products here at BitGo. I've been in this space for just over 1.5 years, but also it seems like forever. Prior to this, I've been at mostly fintech companies doing money management, also in the product space. So excited to be here with you guys and talk a little bit more about this, provide some insight as well.
Awesome. And while we kind of wait for Nathan here, which is funny, we did a pre-call and no issues. And as soon as we go live, there it is. But the title is, solving the blockchain trilemma. And that can be a kind of a deep subject, but there's really only 3 things I want you guys to walk away from this webinar knowing. And that's why protocol stake, why custody, and why Avalanche. To help us get there, I think it might be helpful to go over what's at stake, excuse the pun, but more so, what are the opportunities within Web3? And to start that, it might be helpful to kind of, what is Web3, right? Well, in short, Web3 is a back-end revolution powered by blockchains. This revolution is why we're all here today, but what exactly is it? To answer this, we should take a step back and look at what makes the internet useful in the first place. The current internet comprises several protocols that facilitate storing, accessing, and using data online. These protocols give value to the internet. Blockchain is one of these protocols, allowing you to exchange goods and services with applications and people you don't know or trust without the need for an intermediary. This is done by adding a state layer to the current internet stack. These protocols make the internet more useful and are standards agreed on by everyone. But why is this important? Let me answer that with a quote from James Baldwin. Know from whence you came. If you know from whence you came, there's absolutely no limitations on where you can go. With that said, looking back at the history of the internet, we can see that each iteration of the internet, Web 1 to Web 2, Web 2 to Web 3, we have seen massive financial gains by companies, institutions, and investors adopting and incorporating these protocols into their businesses. A great example of this is Amazon. In 1995, they added the ability for users that were on their website to write to their website. Before this, the internet was only view only. You couldn't participate online at all. Forbes came out and said that this is retail suicide, and about the worst thing that you can do if you owned a website was allow users to write to it. Now, fast forward to 2002 to 2004 when Amazon released this API to the public, and we saw the birth of Web 2, which is now the participatory internet, where users can participate with websites. And we've seen from that the massive growth of social media platforms, online stores, and the works. Huge shifts of value there. So it sounds great, right? And I'm sure we're all here to learn how to take advantage of these protocols. You may be wondering how to get involved and take advantage of the new tech. Well, the simplest way to do this is to acquire tokens and protocol stake them to a validator. It's that simple. But what do you do with them once you buy them? Well, you're definitely going to want to keep them safe, and that's where custody providers come in. To talk more about staking, we'll jump over to Nathan. Nathan, if you'd like to just kind of in a nutshell, what is protocol staking?
Sure.
And how does it fit into what we're talking about here?
And
for,
happy
give
to
a little intro.
Yeah, so sorry for the infinite feedback loop. Monday was a holiday in Canada, so you know, now all the problems from Monday have come over to Tuesday. I'm a senior protocol specialist with Figment, and basically that just means that I research a whole bunch of tokenomics and goings on of networks and make sure that our development teams understand what they need to know so they can operate successfully on these networks. Protocol staking is kind of a newer term. It's something that we've been pushing a lot here lately to distinguish it between other deviations of staking, which have kind of come across on the scene here lately, like liquidity staking and others. So protocol staking really means that you are bonding tokens to a validator on a network in order to make that network more secure. So let's unpack that a little bit. If any of you are familiar with networks that mine, like Bitcoin, the amount of processing power that exists on those networks is sort of like the stake in the game, if you will. If you're going to propose transactions on the network, you're not going to propose spurless or incorrect transactions on that network if you have to use all this processing power to do it, and then other people are using their ability to monitor what you're doing and verify what you're doing. People that are putting up fraudulent transactions get caught pretty quickly. So the idea is that if you're going to propose transactions on the network, you're not going to spend all this time and resource and value in processing all these complicated algorithms to be able to propose. If you're just going to propose something, it's going to get knocked down by everybody else. So it's very hard to attack a network like that because it's very expensive to propose. The problem is it's very resource intensive. So especially with a network like Avalanche that uses very little electricity, it's actually kind of renowned for the resource pervasiveness that it is. It much like Ethereum has now switched over to a proof of stake network entirely, and its energy consumption has dropped. Avalanche has been pretty low energy consumption from the start. And the way that they're able to do that is it's a proof of stake network. So proof of stake, instead of having all these mining operations, what allows you to transact on the network and propose transactions and verify transactions is that you will have stake. The amount of tokens that are produced by the network, token holders will bond those to a validator. And in theory, the validator can get penalized or slashed if they propose bad transactions on the network or they're not performant. So Avalanche is one of the less penalizing networks up to this point. They don't have slashing enabled, and they don't have the penalties enabled like a lot of other proof of stake networks do, where you can have 1 to 5% of the in total bond slashed in the case of double signing or other things. Avalanche hasn't historically had a problem with that, so they haven't had to bring the penalties up, at least to the degree that the other networks have. And it's right now, proof of stake is sort of the developing model that is taking the lead in terms of the third generation, fourth generation blockchains. Most of them are adopting that model or deviations of that model.
You're on mute, I think, Chris.
Yeah, you're on mute, bud.
Story of my life.
I was trying to read your lips there, but I failed short.
So why would I want a protocol stake? What are some of the opportunities and advantages for someone bringing the stake to the table?
Sure. The big reason that you want a protocol stake, at least early for networks, and especially right now for Avalanche, is that the token supply is increasing through inflation. That's one of the ways that they jumpstart networks and incentivize people to utilize them early. And if you stake, part of that, the agreement with the network is that the people that bond to validators share in the rewards that are earned by those validators when they transact on the network. So right now, The participation for Avalanche has been a little bit higher than a lot of other blockchains. They've kind of estimated somewhere between like 65 to 70% of the total tokens on the network have been involved in staking. And that means that of all these rewards that are being produced, they're being paid to 65% of the network, the ones that stake. So if you're part of the 35% or so that doesn't stake, all of the rewards that you otherwise would have been receiving are not going to you, they're going to the people that stake. So you're essentially being deflated out of any rewards that you would have received by not participating in the staking process.
So you could almost say that not staking is exposing yourself to principal erosion.
Yes.
And that staking is kind of like dollar cost averaging every day for free.
Yeah, of course.
I like that. I like that.
That's why we encourage it.
Now, if we're talking about dollar cost averaging every day for free, there has to be risks, right? So what are some of the risks that you would have if you're protocol staking that you wouldn't have if you were just hodling or holding it?
Yeah. The primary risk for networks that have slashing enabled is that you have to go with a validator that's going to be performant. If the validator is not going to be performant, then you have a lot of risks associated there with getting penalized or slashed. And when you're slashed, that portion of stake that you have bonded to the network is burnt and goes away. So obviously that's a pretty severe penalty. Since Avalanche doesn't have that enabled, it's one of the safer networks to participate in staking. But the real risk from someone who's participating on Avalanche per se, as opposed to other networks, is more of a liquidity risk, which exists with a lot of other networks too, like most of the Cosmos networks where they have unbonding periods. So the minimum staking period on Avalanche is 14 days. Then again, if you're going to be staking, most of the time, those are people that are going to be long-term investors in a network or long-term participators in a network. So you're not looking to unbond and day trade with this amount on a constant basis. So the liquidity risk isn't really it's a risk, but it's not really an apparent risk for someone who's going to be involved with staking. But nonetheless, 14-day unbond is the minimum. Avalanche is kind of unique in the sense that there's not a minimum unbond period that exists, and you perpetually stake until you decide to unbond or bond additional stake like exists on other networks. For Avalanche, when you start your staking period, you set the time frame for that staking period. So 14 days, 21 days, anything up to a year, or whatever the validator has left on its validation cycle. And during that time, you're participating in staking. So the longer the period that you select, the higher rewards you're going to receive. But there's, there is somewhat of a risk in the sense that if you're not maintaining 80% uptime during the entire staking period, then you're not going to earn rewards at the end. But, given the history and stability of Avalanche's network, that's never really been a risk. I checked all of our validators a little bit ago to see what their uptime has been, and we have a 99.61, 99.51, and 99.41 over that period. So, and most other validators do as well that are running. Avalanche tends to get professional validators to operate on the network as opposed to amateurs. So it's uptime is not as much of an issue on that network, mostly because the validators are good. And as I often say, validators are not a zero-sum game. We need good validators to work with us to provide validation services. So we can't be the only good ones. There has to be other providers that also are performant. And why someone would want to stake with Figment or why someone would participate with one validator versus another. A lot of times that deals with their overall asset strategy. A lot of times people will select more than one validator as part of that strategy. But usually clients that stake with us because of our customer service and our API services and other things that we bring to the table in addition to supporting them with validation services.
So we talked about some of the risks that stakers face. What are some of the risk mitigations that Figment's doing to help mitigate those risks?
Well, first off, we have 34 different security monitors that are on our validator nodes for Avalanche at any given time. So I'm on pager duty. There's other people in the DevOps department that are on pager duty 24/7. So anytime that we see any type of performance degradation, people are immediately notified and put on, which is industry standard for professional validator services. Again, in terms of total risk of the network, as opposed to some other networks that are a little bit more buggy, and we know who they are because they break down a lot, and there's news announcements about them breaking down quite frequently. Avalanche has been an extremely stable network, so it's not one, again, that I would classify as a high risk or as a network that's early in its life cycle to where downtime is a constant problem. It's mature enough and stable enough to where that's rarely a risk. It's a good network if you've never staked before to try staking. As short terms, again, up to 14 days minimum staking terms. It's an easy one to get your feet wet and try it out if you've never tried it before.
And the transaction fees are very low.
Yes.
So in a nutshell, Nathan, why would you choose Figment over another validator? What's Figment bring to the table that not anyone else brings?
Yeah, we discussed that a little bit, but validation services are kind of like gas to a certain degree. As gas from one gas station is pretty similar to gas from another gas station. The reason that you would stop at one versus another is what else they bring to you. So again, it's a lot of times when people choose us, it's because they like our customer service offerings, or they like the other protocol APIs that we bring to the table, or they're just happy with the performance that we bring over time. A lot of times people will choose us too because of the amount of networks that we stake. So instead of having to have multiple platforms for multiple providers across all the networks that you would want to stake on, we support over 60 blockchain networks, and we can operate as a one-stop shop for a lot of our clients.
I love it. Thank you so much, Nathan. I appreciate that. So now we've talked about what is staking, what is Web3, and then what you need to do in order to participate. Buy the tokens, stake the tokens. Well, now we're on to the next step. How do we keep these tokens safe? If you've spent any time on the news in the last year or anywhere in 2022, you've probably seen quite a few headlines about funds are safe, this hack happened, this thing happened. So that's always going to be top of mind as a token holder. How do you keep your tokens safe? Daniel, why should someone holding large amounts of tokens want to think about a custody provider over self-custody? And maybe for those who don't know, give a quick definition of what is custody and what's self-custody.
Yeah, no, that's great. So self-custody is where you, the user, maintains your own keys, as self-custody mentions. So, but this puts all the onus on yourself. So it gives you full control, as the saying goes, not your keys, not your crypto, which is great. But I think crypto is still kind of in that nascent part of the adoption curve where there's a lot of solutions out there that allows you to self-custody it. There's hardware wallets, there's hot wallets, but it puts all the onus again on the user itself. So you have to make sure that you store the keys safely. If it ever gets stolen, you have to figure out how to get it back. And if you ever lose your keys, unfortunately, there's not that many options out there, at least for self-custody, to do it. Now, again, this puts all the control into yourself, but at the same time, it puts all the risk, headaches, all the managements on yourself. A custodian is where instead of you holding the keys yourself, you have a third-party custodian or company manage it for you. Now, it kind of flips the pros and cons where you kind of give up some of the control for the convenience, where instead of you having to worry about losing your keys, storing it safely and securely, you have someone else do that for you. Now that puts all the onus on that third party, which is where kind of BitGo comes in. Oh, I think you're on.
Chris, I think you're on mute again.
I did it again. All right. So we kind of went over some of the risks for self-custody. You have to maintain your own private keys, and that can be a huge headache if you have multiple chains or multi-sigs or a bunch of people in your organization that need access to these funds. What are some of the risks if you use a custody provider?
Yeah, so some of the risks, so I kind of highlighted some of the benefits of going with the custodians, as you don't have to manage your keys. You could trust a third-party entity to do it. They might have multi-sig available. And if you are maintaining multiple chains or multiple coins, it becomes a headache to manage all that. Now, on the flip side, it puts all the onus on the custodian, where if the custodian ever gets hacked or if they make any mistakes, you lose kind of full control over it, because you're allowing this custodian to effectively manage your digital wealth on behalf of yourself, which means that if they ever mess up in any other ways, you're kind of out of luck in that case. So typically how you mitigate this, where kind of BitGo comes in to mitigate it, is we are a qualified custodian. So you have basic custodians where you have a third party manage your keys on your behalf, but there's another layer on top of it where BitGo comes in as a qualified custodian. There's a lot of regulated customers out there who wants exposure to crypto, but for regulatory reasons, they themselves are not allowed to have crypto on their balance book. So how they allow themselves to get access and exposure to crypto is by using a qualified custodian, where BitGo comes in to alleviate that risk of, we're not just any custodian, but we're a qualified custodian. Now, going to some of those key managements of, as I mentioned, you have someone else manage your keys for you. How BitGo kind of goes over that is, we were one of the most secure and first crypto custodian out there, where we start with Bitcoin all the way back from, I believe, 2012. So we've been in this game for quite a while, right? In the landscape of crypto, anything past 5, 6, 7 years is almost considered ancient. Not to say BitGo is too old, but we've been through 3 crypto winters, going through the one right now. So we've kind of know how the markets plays out and how to make sure that safety and security is the name of the game. That's what we adhere to. Not only that, all of our crypto, all of our coins and blockchains that we manage is all using multi-sig to make sure that not only are you safe in the sense that it's just not one point of failure where someone could lose their keys, but you could set it up with multiple approvers. So you need multiple signatures in order to create wallets and send transactions. So you have that extra layer of security on top of that. Oh, sorry, I forgot. And one last thing is, just to pitch BitGo a little bit, is as a regulated custodian, one of the key things that we have is insurance. So going back to the not your keys, not your crypto, we understand that. But because of that, we have qualified insurance, which means that if BitGo ever, for certain qualified custodian wallets, if BitGo ever loses the keys or mismanages it, we have up to $250 million of qualified insurance to cover that. So it gives our institutional clients, more comfort and security that not only is BitGo having the highest standards to maintain these keys, but we have, insurance to make sure that if we ever mess up on our doing, we cover that.
I was just about to ask if BitGo is doing anything to mitigate those risks for its users.
Precisely. Security is the name of the game.
You read my mind. It really is. And to kind of just recap everything that BitGo has to offer, why would you want to choose BitGo custody?
Yeah, that's a great question. It comes down to what you need. I think BitGo has a full menu of a lot of services to do it. So primarily for regulated investors, our qualified custodian, we are only one of the few that could offer that. So right off the bat, if you need qualified custody with multi-sig capability, BitGo fits your need right there. In addition to that, we have a slew of other services that we provide. So in the following along this conversation, we have staking that we offer out of both hot and cold storage wallets. So you can earn additional rewards on top of the rewards that you have in custody. We have our Prime service. So whenever you need to do trading and certain fiat on-ramp, off-ramp of assets, we support that as well.
Awesome. And do people have access to rewards reporting with you guys as well?
So as a regulated institution, that's a great point that you called out. So we have reports for institutions to see not only your wallet balances, but how much you've staked and how much rewards have you received, both from our UI and API. So our customer segment is pretty big. As I mentioned, BitGo has been in this space for a while. So for more of our institutional customers, we have all the right audit reports, all the security to make sure that not only are your assets safe, but you can report on them and audit it correctly. For more of our platform exchange API users, we have a slew of APIs to make it very generic to create wallets, send, receive, and also stake programmatically. So if your business relies on heavy programmatic access and service of crypto to your end users, BitGo has all that ready to go.
We have a great question here from Thomas in the chat. Is the 250 million insurance by client account, or is it overall across BitGo?
I believe it's by client account, but I think I need to double check on that.
All right, Thomas. We'll go with client account, but we'll get back to you on that one. And we already did that one. Yeah, just to kind of sum it up, why choose BitGo?
Oh, sorry.
Well, sales rejected, Thomas. Oh, perfect. Okay, cool. We already did yes. What's coming up on your guys' roadmap for BitGo? Anything interesting that the people might want to know about?
Yes. So quick plug in. There's plenty of stuff that's coming along. We actually just launched Solana and Near staking out of our custody cold wallets and hot wallets. So we have the ERC20 Matic, as well as AVAX staking coming out by the end of October, as well as Polkadot, and Cardano auto staking by end of this year, as well as a whole slew of other supported assets for our trading platform. So Near, Solana, Avalanche, we're targeting for the end of this year. So not only can you custody these assets, if you want to trade for fiat or other crypto pairings, we also have that with our BitGo Prime solution.
Oh, that's exciting. So we now know why stake. We know why custody. How about why Avalanche? For those that may not know, Avalanche is made up of 3 different chains. Jay, can you tell us why Avalanche's primary network is multi-chain and how this addresses the trilemma we see with proof of work chains?
Yeah, definitely. So I think there are 2 different reasons. So I just kind of want to clarify that. But the reason why we're focusing on 3 chains, so it effectively is actually the way we bucket it, explain it is 2 for the end user. One is the platform chain, and then the other bucket is the exchange chain and the contract chain. So let me just kind of go into those details for a second. So all of the things that we talked about up to this point with staking, that exists on the platform chain. The platform chain, from a simplistic view, can be viewed as kind of a governance layer, one that manages staking, one that manages subnets. Can kind of get that into that later. Basically the hub, if you will, if you aren't technical, and that's usually how I explain it. Then the second bucket is really lean towards actually performing those functions like transactions or even smart contracts. So basically the exchange chain, as the name kind of alludes to a little bit, it's really focused on trading. So really optimized for trade. It's actually a DAG, so not a blockchain, and I don't even want to go too in depth in those technicalities, but blockchain is one linear chain. In contracts, you need order. If there wasn't any order, then contracts simply wouldn't exist. That you need order for that to actually work. And DAGs actually basically throw order out the window and also don't have to actually process these transactions linearly as a result. And so they're actually able to process transactions as quickly as possible. So those are kind of the 2 use cases, really effectively a hedge on each other. If smart contracts really takes off as a vertical, amazing. We have an EVM compatible chain or Ethereum virtual machine compatible chain. Basically, again, like the simplistic way to review that is the EVM is a computational layer that executes smart contracts innovated by, of course, Ethereum, based on the name. And we've basically taken that and said, Solidity is a very widely used smart contracts programming language. It's also a very robust community. Let's not reinvent the wheel to try and introduce a new paradigm to a whole different set of people or even the existing folks. And let's try and lean into what has worked in the past. And so that's where we chose the EVM. But luckily, the way we've structured out, again, the subnets, which I'll kind of quickly go over in a second, you could actually run technically any type of VM. So that's where the horizontal scaling comes in. And before I kind of keep referencing subnets without explaining it, let me just stop there. Subnets is our horizontal scaling solution. And so you have this primary network. That's what we've covered with the 3 chains or the 2 buckets that I basically overviewed. And then you can have any chain effectively that, I don't know, the best easy way to describe it is it can basically operate what you want it to operate in terms of customizations, whether that's fee structures or how the staking parameters work. You could actually even use your own tokens. Recently, we just put out an update where you could actually make these chains kind of not centralized in control effectively. That's the best way to explain it, and make it so once it's deployed and you have the parameters set, you actually kind of release it into a more decentralized manner. I don't want to say fully trustless because that word actually means something in our space. So very similar in that effect. And I think the key here is if you think about the model I've just described and the jumbled up explanation, you simply have this hub and spoke. And all the spokes are these subnets. And when you ask, okay, is a subnet a side chain that operates on its own? Well, not quite. It actually, every single validator set, so a lot of the stuff that Nathan overviewed in the beginning, all that actually has to exist on the subnet as well. So every single subnet that validates, let's say, subnet, BitGo subnet, for example, those validators must also validate the primary network. And so you actually have value accrual for the entire network. But also we didn't want to be too restrictive in saying, hey, your subnet has to require staking, because again, they might want to use their own coins or tokens to accrue more value within their own projects and dApps and deployments. And so we wanted that flexibility, and we're kind of interested to see how the devs, but also the users interact with this new shift, just since subnets really has been a fairly recent kind of feature that was launched just earlier this year, I would say. And then I think the next step is really creating interoperability amongst all the chains. And so that's kind of the big focus area for the team right now. Yeah, so unfortunately, I don't know too much about IBC, like in terms of technical perspectives, but from what I know, it is a very similar model. Parachains is also a similar model as well. I think that parachains restrict their deployments to 100. And the way they've done it in the past is they auction off the parachains, or basically what a subnet is, to the highest bidder. From my perspective, this is just my personal view, I think one thing that it's led to is it's fairly restrictive on who can actually access those parachains. And so it becomes a little bit of a bidding war, but perhaps, maybe that's their angle, and that's totally fine. And so we're kind of taking more of like hey, we want anyone and everyone to try and deploy their projects or deployments on Avalanche, and that's really the overall goal, at least this early in the game. And then I think Cosmos, one of the things that they're doing a lot, which is amazing, I have a bunch of friends in that ecosystem, is just they've been working at this problem for such a long time. I think for better or for worse, they had many more bull and bear markets, which I always joke about. Like, I think sometimes they might have been a little bit too early, but they have plenty of legitimacy from the tech side, and they also have a really amazing core community that reminds me of ours, but it's like a totally foreign language. It's vastly different. I went to a Cosmos meetup and I didn't understand anything anyone was saying. Yeah, there's another question. Sorry, Chris. There's
you're fine.
What are you most excited about? What's coming to AVAX? So I mean, there's so much, but I mean, in the context of this conversation, what I basically alluded to is the inter-subnet communications. Once that's open, that really alleviates UX. That stretches out to a larger theme that I'm extremely excited about, which is just this holistic bucket of user experience and making that better. In the first iteration of Web3, I think from like once Ethereum launched and even the first 5 years, and I think even still now, there was this notion that if we build it, they will come type mentality. As someone who's not technical, I kind of tend to find it's a little bit more on the dev side, but I don't know. I don't want to necessarily bucket it that way, but it's interesting, right? Like, it works for everybody on this call, but what we needed to make it work for is everybody outside of this call. Not necessarily the grandparents. I know that example gets used a lot. I tend to find, before we tackle our grandparents, let's actually go for our peers first. And once we get that, we can start moving forward. And so along with protocol improvements, there's also a lot of infrastructure improvements on the wallet side. So Core is a wallet that the Ava Labs team has launched a little bit ago, probably early summer, late summer, if I recall correctly. We also have a bunch of new improvements on the Block Explorer side. As much as it is a huge tool for, again, the pro users, we also do believe that it will become a tool that's more prevalent beyond that. And so we need to make sure that it's human readable baseline and also useful. And then perhaps there's other things that we're working kind of in stealth, and you'll see that as it relates to some of these themes. And ultimately, what I hope to see is by Q2, Q3, sometime next year, even end of next year, we're in a whole different ball game where the user experience from both the retail user side or the average user side, but also the developer side, is going to be vastly improved. And so if another bull run, if and when, I guess, another bull run comes and all this energy comes, then I think it's going to be a little bit more smooth sailing. And I honestly think that's been the case for every single cycle. We're just, we're very capable space. We're human nature to kind of adapt and also iterate as quickly as possible. And I think we've done that pretty well, all things considered.
Awesome. And not to go back too far, but we were talking about some of the differences between Avalanche and proof of work chains. And with the 3 chains, I'm assuming that Avalanche's consensus model is pretty different than the typical proof of stake consensus model. Could you kind of just go over that a little bit for us?
Yes. So one of the best cop-outs I have during these types of segments is I have this amazing 3-minute video that not even I was a part of. It was actually our founder, Goon, who's an insanely talented super knowledgeable computer scientist, had decade-long experience at Cornell focusing on blockchain and distributed systems research. And so one of the videos I'll share in the chat is something I would recommend, but high level, aside from proof of stake as a way to kind of secure the network effectively, there's also the consensus protocol, as you alluded to, which is enabling all the value props of Avalanche. Long story short, it's a novel consensus protocol. It works. It's been working for a little over 2 years now, since mainnet launch was in September 2020. And of course, we still need to prove reliability out. I don't think it's a 2-year game. I don't think it's a 5-year game. I think these systems must be resilient for decades on end. And so that's our aspiration. And so far, with the loads that we've seen, especially with transaction spikes, especially with more active wallets, and
there are
and all these things alike, we were able to see performance not degrade really the entire time, and we were able to adjust accordingly. And so that's, I think, the long and short of it. And then let me just post this video really quickly so Gun can kind of take the limelight for those that are interested.
Yeah, the other thing I would say, Chris, to that too, is that for something like Cosmos, Atom isn't necessarily that important to anything that's built on the Cosmos SDK unless their design wants to utilize it. You can take as much of it or as little of it as you want, which is good in some respects and it's bad in some respects. One of the benefits of Ethereum's approach is that anything that's going to be built on Ethereum is going to have value that's also placed into the Ethereum blockchain and the Ethereum token. So Avalanche kind of has a blended approach there. It allows it to be modular for what's built on top of it, but it still secures the underlying value of Avalanche for anything else that exists on the ecosystem. So as opposed to Cosmos, where you can't really, there's no one token that will allow you to bank on the entire ecosystem. You could do that with Avalanche.
Nice. And that was kind of my what I was getting at, is like he said, it'll bring value back to the base chain, whereas we don't see that in Cosmos with IBC like that. So kind of tying into a question we have in chat here, what would you say to anyone who is hesitant in getting involved? Oh, there it is. Okay. Getting involved with Avalanche. What are some pros and cons? It's kind of tying that. So I guess basically, what's the value proposition for the Avalanche protocol?
The largest thing I would say holistically about hesitancy, one thing that helped me, I'm sure you guys as well, is just use the product. It's not just specific to Avalanche. It's specific to, or it's broad to all of us. Figment, BitGo, Avalanche, the rest. And then also the caveat is not to put a huge amount of value into that trial period. I think that's the most important caveat. So when I first started to really get into the DeFi space as it was growing out, one of the first roles I had back in the early 2015, 16, 17 era, one of the best ways of education was to actually use the DEX and just to do as many trades as possible, see what happens, see when trades fail, see when trades succeed, try like really edge cases. Maybe you want to, like mess with the MetaMask or browser extension configurations while you're going to commit a trade or try and cancel that transaction, all these different things. And you'll start to really understand like it's actually not as complex because you're actually behind the wheel. When it comes to then Avalanche, I think, let's see. So pros are it settles transactions in under a second. That's an insane value proposition. To me, it was really hard for me to believe that until I saw it on mainnet and used it myself, similar to my recommendation first. And myself and Patrick Sutton, he's the comms lead at the Ava Labs team, we were saying like, wow, this is like magic. It's insane. As someone who's a pro user, avid user of the Ethereum space, it was like night and day. And I think that was really cool to see. Alongside that, transaction fees are extremely low. If you're on that contract chain, they're like cents on the dollar. If you're on that exchange chain, they're fractions of a cent. So depending on what your use cases are. I think the other one is really security. The validation topic that we've been talking about for the last half hour, we have about 1,400 validators on that primary network. And so in simple terms, you have 1,400 participants producing or processing transactions for the network. And so the over 50% is half that plus one, of course. And aside from that, eco-friendliness too, that was mentioned by Nathan. The stat that we are writing on that we do talk about a lot is Avalanche, the network itself as it stands, is consuming around the same amount of energy as about 60 households in the US. So if you can kind of just put that into perspective, not terribly too much for a financial system that reaches the entire globe. In terms of cons, I think the opportunities on our side are really just that we're new, and I think we're the underdog. But one of the things that I love hearing is people are really excited about the tech. People are really excited about the team, the early, really committed community. And so as someone on the marketing team, we're really trying to get ahead of that. I think some of the things we're hearing, just to bring real examples into the conversation, events. We're very aggressive with events. We want to truly bring this technology to life. How do you explain Web3? Well, it's the easiest if it's in the physical space, right? Number two is aggressiveness within an ecosystem growth. We have plenty of different incentive programs. We're focusing on verticals, but that are very ambitious, but also niches. We need allies on our side in order to grow this out, not just within our ecosystem, but also multi-chain. I know sometimes in our space we get a little bit competitive, which is totally okay. But I think we're trying to embrace that and really just work with whomever has great ideas. And then I think the last thing to kind of set this in threes is really a lot of the different technical innovations that are still to come. So a lot of the soft items that I mentioned before, but the other things like I mentioned before, like the subnet, inter-subnet communications. We have improvements that relate to core as well, the browser extension, a whole new experience that I can't get into too much detail, but it's actually really cool. It gets me really excited. And it's something that I was like, I can't believe this hasn't existed before. So hopefully no one beats us to the punch. And those are kind of the quick things I can touch on.
Oh man, you got me all excited with a little bit out there.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Tell me. So, I mean, you kind of hit it on here with all the pros of the Avalanche blockchain, but I've noticed like lately, it seems like the devs and everybody, like they're integrating Avalanche staking, devs are coming, like it seems to be going through this huge growth phase right now. Well, why do you think Avalanche's architecture is attracting these users and devs of all kinds to build and secure the Avalanche network?
I think it's with the flexibility. That's one of the main value propositions. Also that EVM value proposition that I brought up before. If you're a Solidity developer, to port over whatever you've been working on is extremely simple and easy and quick. I would also say, again, like reliability and all those value propositions as well. These dApps or even deployments, everyone in some way, shape, or form is an entrepreneur. They also have their best interest in mind, and they need to focus on long-term viability. If you have chains that aren't performing to spec, if you have security vulnerabilities, hacks, if that ever happens, and all these different other risks involved, and those keep bubbling up, as an entrepreneur, you're going to start to be questioning, hey, how should I evaluate these risks? And so I think right now we're seeing a lot of devs just excited to try it, because I think it's right now, not just in Avalanche's context, everyone's kind of shopping around to see who they can commit to as the long-term partner, whether that's a single chain or multi-chain, it doesn't matter. I think the second bucket is really what I alluded to earlier, which is improvement on user experience. We've really taken a lot of care and effort to understand the entire developer journey, and there's still so much more. And so I'm not saying we're at a mature state by any means, but we've gone a long way. Some things include leaning to partners such as BitGo and Figment. Figment does an incredible job leading people down the funnel, or just explaining this really complex content and creating tooling that works really well for them. And so we don't even have to do that in-house. BitGo is the same thing for a totally different clientele. Focusing on buying in institutions and enterprises, really talking to them, what are the risks that they need to be worried about? What are the use cases that they should be thinking about? Also, then by the time it gets to Avalanche, the decision is basically clear. And then kind of rounding that other thought out with UX, that involves overhauling developer documentation, creating those in-person and online events that really tackle the pain points and figure out how best can we address those pain points. Is it short-term with marketing content, or is it long-term with actual product changes or platform changes? Usually it's a little bit of both. And I think that's also what people are seeing. And then ultimately, I think the last thing, which I've alluded to with other pieces, is really just the track record. Resiliency, the chain hasn't stopped to date. It's been running smoothly since launch. We've continued to grow, and we're still looking to grow that as well. Subnets is something that, of course, we're focusing on as well. So we've had a handful of subnet deployments with more to come. And so I think that's going to continue to test a lot of the different strengths that I listed earlier, And if those are true, then the narrative continues to strengthen and then rinse and repeat.
Nice. And Jonathan here kind of beat me to the punch, but anything you would like to let the people know about that's upcoming, alpha leaks, events, anything for Avalanche?
Yeah, the main focus I think for us is the Avalanche Creates event series that is starting in Berkeley in California, end of this month. The exact dates are Monday, October 23rd, up and through Friday, October 28th. The structure, I can kind of quickly go over the high level. The goal is to focus on builders and entrepreneurs, or developers, sorry, and entrepreneurs. The curriculum is a 5-day curriculum. We have 4 days of content, 1 day of pitch day. And so if you have 2 days for Monday to Tuesday, we have developer workshops that really focus on different challenges that developers might want to meet and then also, or address, sorry. And then the second 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday, is more soft skills like, hey, now that you have this DApp or now that you have this deployment, what's next? How do you maximize your business development strategy? How do you maximize your go-to-market strategy, things like that. And then the last day is a pitch day to pitch in front of VCs. We have a lot of amazing VCs from the Bay Area that have committed to really just see what the young and budding talent looks like. And so that's kind of the event series in a nutshell. You can go to avalanchecrates.com to register and apply. And then the last thing to touch on is Creates is really not just specific to the regions. The whole point of this is for it to scale. And so we're looking towards and looking forward to a holistic curriculum. So if you aren't in the Bay Area or you're not in location number 2, 3, wherever that may be, you can actually sit at your computer, go from zero to learning Solidity to deploying a DApp all the way through to pitching a pitch deck to pre-seed and seed rounds, for example. And that's kind of our goal. And we'll start to really focus in on areas that have challenges. If we find people have a lot of challenges earlier in the cycle, then we'll kind of shift the curriculum to really bolster that. If people feel like it's long-term, then sure, we can keep it as it is, and so on and so forth.
I like that. Really switching away from the build it and they will come to bring the builders and build it.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So we've come to that point in the webinar where we open it up to questions and answers from the audience. And we'll start with our first question from Megan. Who's your target demographic for staking? Seems like newcomers to the space may shy away, while others that have been in the industry for a while are already familiar. And I'll just let whoever would like to take that one run with it.
I can take that one if you want. Basically, if you're already going to purchase a token and you're going to be involved in a network to some degree, you're going to be testing transactions, you're going to be trying to bank long-term on the development of the network. There's not a huge amount of risk to staking on a network like Avalanche as opposed to just long-term hold. Like we discussed earlier, the risk would really be that if you're trying to run a validator by yourself, if you're trying, there are some networks you could certainly do that, and there's some communities out there that will be great at helping you do it. The downside is if you don't know what you're doing, you can lose a lot of money very quickly getting slashed on networks that implement slashing. So for a network like Avalanche that doesn't have that and has relatively short staking terms, the only real risk that you run into is liquidity risk. That hey, I have to have that immediately to be able to offload or be able to transfer, and you can't transfer while you're in the middle of a lockup period. So that's really the only major risk. Other than that, again, all the rewards that are being paid out to validators are being shared with people that delegate to them. So if you're not delegating, you are losing quite a bit of network transactional rewards that otherwise would have been transferred to you, but for the fact that you weren't staking. So it's your stake is basically being liquidated over time, just like a stock split. Just one of the ways I explain to folks is like if you don't stake on a network that has rewards enabled, you're essentially giving away your stock splits to the people that are staking. So it's not a good solution long term, especially with networks that have relatively high reward rates. And Avalanche is one of the relatively high reward rates. Again, just a shade under 9% APY.
Did anyone else want to add to that?
Yeah, I could chime in. So from an institution perspective, there's a variety of reasons why you would stake, and there's a variety of reasons why you wouldn't stake. I think from a very yield generation perspective, I try not to use yield gen, but as Nathan alluded to, some of these staking coins, they do have some kind of inflationary mechanism in place. So not only are if you don't stake, you're basically part of your values being chipped away by funding others. But also, if the coin itself has an inflationary mechanism, which a lot of staking coins do, if you don't stake, the purchasing power of your coin itself is also going down. In addition to that, that's just from like a reward generation perspective. But a lot of these staking coins, their governance model is all based on staking. To have a say, like the whole idea of cryptos is decentralize the powers of the community. To have a say in a lot of these proof of stake coins, you do want to stake in order to have some kind of like voting powers. Obviously, it's going to be a little different from here to there. AVAX has a governance model where you can like delegate your votes to a validator and they would vote on your behalf, but it allows you to have a say in the blockchain, which is a very powerful reason really to stake.
Perfect. Do you want to throw anything on there, Jay, or any more questions from the audience?
Yeah, I think there's a subnet question. I know there are limitations based on how much the node can handle, but I don't want to mislead. So let me see if we can get back to you after while I look into that.
Yeah, that's a complicated question as
Yeah.
phrased.
Yeah, exactly.
It depends on what you're putting on there. It depends on the design of what the underlying subnets are. Like there's a lot of sub questions to that question before you could answer it.
Mm-hmm.
And what's your guys' Twitter so the people can follow you?
Oops.
Mine's easy. Nathan Workman. all one word.
JKS.
Workman spelled like it sounds.
Sounds just like it sounds.
And then the Figment Twitter is Figment_IO. And then we also have a newsletter. I dropped the link in the chat if you guys would like to become a Figment insider. That goes out weekly and quarterly, depending on how much news you would like to get. Oh, you're welcome, Genevieve. Yeah, are there any resources that you guys suggest for Avalanche? What's the best place for people to go and stay in the know there?
Yeah, I think
Avalanche's YouTube is excellent.
Yeah.
If I can jump in there, one of the things that we constantly complain about is documentation for networks and which ones do a good job with it and which ones don't. And Avalanche's knowledge base on their website is good. It's technical for a lot of folks that are going to be introduced to it, but they have a YouTube that is absolutely second to none. I'd say it's industry leading in terms of education and the amount of content that they have on there. It's very, very good.
And funny enough, I wasn't even thinking about that, but as I think about it, I think the main thing that's amazing about our YouTube is it's not just our content. We wanted to focus on scaling. There's amazing content made by community members, people that are close to our team from a contract perspective, even partners such as the ones dialed in here. And so a lot of that, we tried to make sure that we're not reinventing the wheel and we're using the great content. And then also if there are gaps, of course, we fill that immediately. So appreciate the nod, Nathan.
Yeah, that's good. I like that you guys do that with that one. There's also this really good video if you're kind of still on the fence about what is Avalanche. And this one's from DeFi Teller. I went ahead and threw it a link in the chat for that one. It's one of my favorite, real simple, high level. It's got pictures. It's like a picture book explainer. It's really good. And then for BitGo, Daniel, do you have any resources you'd like to share with people?
Yeah, I think Genevieve could pass it on. We have something called Water Cooler to our customers and external folks where we kind of go over, it's a little bit more on the institutional side and more of a market landscape, but we also highlight a lot of coins that we support, because as BitGo, we try to be more blockchain agnostic because we want to help the ecosystem grow, but we partner with as many of the specific chains to kind of broaden the message and show the values of one over the other. I think that's a great resource to do it. And I would also echo Nathan. I've been on the AVAX's site as well as a YouTube channel, and I love learning more about it. I'm also personally a big believer in AVAX. One of my foray into DeFi was also very similar to what Jay mentioned, where because it's so cheap and so fast, any mistakes I make, and there was a lot of them, were more forgiven versus for ETH at the time with gas fees on the rise during the DeFi summer. It was a lot more painful when I made a mistake.
Sorry, I had to do my dad joke. AVAX is so dag cool. I love it. And from Megan, if you just kind of, before we all close out on this one, unless we have another one, but Jay, do you have like an elevator pitch for people, like why Avalanche over Ethereum, etc.? Megan's wondering. She has an Avalanche Maxi and she's building on it right now, but I'm sure she needs a little bit of tools there in her toolbox.
Yeah, I think the elevator pitch is it's basically Ethereum with a faster engine. If there are any people that come after me for that, it's okay. But I still love Ethereum. That's how I started my career. So I really have a lot of love for that scene. And honestly, Avalanche wouldn't be here without Ethereum, especially with the smart contract side. So that's kind of the quick one-liner from me.
I'm totally stealing that. That's perfect.
Yeah, I would just add to that, Chris, that Figment's also chain agnostic. We want everybody to be successful because we think that all chains have something to offer. And right now is still a time of experimentation for networks. And it's to hold someone to a design or to hold a network and try to pigeonhole it and say, well, it is a like Polygon. Oh, it's solely focused on the creation of these subnets and development of subnets and is committed to multi-chain architecture and a certain path. We're one network change away, one governance upgrade away from all of that changing drastically. So, network architecture can change very, very quickly for all of these chains. Everybody's experimenting and trying to figure out the best options forward based on the type of transactions they have and the type of user base they have. There's not going to be one winner. Sorry to tell you, it's not like this is one gigantic greyhound race and one chain is going to get 99% of the market share. It's not going to develop that way. I mean, anybody that's currently a top 50 market cap network has a chance of developing a base and growing. So, and then ones outside the top 50 still have a chance. I mean, look at Solana, the growth that it had last year. So it's there's no one out of the hunt. Everybody's still developing and everybody's still trying to grow. So it's better not to be a speculator. It's better to be a participator at this point and get involved with the networks and see what's developing.
Yeah.
I'd like to add on that. It's I don't think any future where you look at blockchain the way that it was meant to be built and it's ever a one chain situation. I think the future is definitely multi-chain, and we're going to need it. Like those app chains, those specific subnets to do their specific jobs. You're going to need that. It's we're trying to do too much and to have one thing do it all. It's not going to work. I mean, that's the whole thing with the blockchain trilemma, right?
Yep.
Well, thank you guys so much. Do you have any? Oh, Nathan, I forgot to ask you. Where can people find out more information about Figment?
Best way is to go to the website. It's figment.io. And you can find articles about all the different networks that we support and information about how to get started with staking.
Yep. And we also have our Twitter and YouTube at the same name at figment.i/i_io. And go ahead and follow that, subscribe, ring the bell, get up to date on all things Figment. With that said, thank you guys for joining. I really appreciate it. This webinar was so dag cool.
Keep going.
All right. When you laugh at your own joke.
Chris, I guess can we do the call to actions? Jay and I have something
yes,
to call out.
Yes,
Jay,
yes. Let's do it.
Yeah, so I guess aside from Avalanche Creates, call to action, follow us on Twitter. I think that's the best way to start getting the feed into your life. And then from there, there's certainly many different rabbit holes that you could explore. So Avalanche, about AVAX, all one word. That's the Avalanche handle. And yeah, enjoy the journey. Yeah.
And on the BitGo side, we actually have kind of on the subject of this, we have our Activate conference for developers. So I see Megan is a big developer on there, but anyone in your network that wants to kind of participate in a multi-chain developer conference, we have that available. Just reach out to BitGo or go to activate.bitgo.com and get more information there.
Excellent. Anything you want to call out there, Nathan? Are we good?
No, just be on the lookout for Figment Quarterly. We're going to release in about a week for our reflections on Q3 for staking. And if you, it's a good newsletter to subscribe to if you don't, for industry insights and reflections about what we're thinking about.
Yep. And you can subscribe to that at figment.com or figment.io/subscribe.
Yep.
All right. And thank you all for attending. Until next time, happy staking.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care, everyone.